So it is February 3rd, 2022. This is our design review committee meeting. We have one proposal for 116 Waldemar Avenue. This is to combine lots and erect an 11-unit residential dwelling with 14 parking spaces.
Great. I'll go ahead and share my screen whenever you're ready.
You can go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. You able to see that?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So good evening, everyone. My name is Richard Linz. I'm an attorney here in East Boston. I represent Gene McCalden, who's the property owner at 116 Waldemar. With me is also Eric Zackerson, who is the project architect. This is our second presentation to the Orion Heights Neighborhood Council Subcommittee. We made an initial presentation back in September. We heard a good deal of feedback. And we wanted to get you an update as to where we're at to try to discuss and review some of the concerns and things that we were requested to address. I'm going to run through the presentation and I'll highlight the updates where appropriate. But for the most part, if you've seen this before, you've seen most of this before, please bear with me because we just want to make sure we have everybody who may be joining for the first time up to speed on what the proposal is. So as Tony had mentioned, this is a proposal to combine lots and we are proposing to demolish the existing structure. We are now proposing the construction of a new 11-unit residential dwelling. This would include 14 garage parking spaces. We've actually reduced this from 12 units. Originally our proposal involved 12 units, but this has now been dropped down to 11. The units would range in size from approximately 900 to about 1,100 square feet. Two of the units, which is now 18%, would be set aside under what we call the City of Boston inclusionary development policy. Inclusionary development policy says that when you are proposing a project that is 10 or more units that requires zoning relief, that 13% of those units should be set aside under the IDP, which ensures an affordability component. In this case, we are intending these for home ownership. So the resale prices would be limited by deed restriction to an amount that is reflective of the affordable units for the City of Boston. And we would be applying more than what the minimum is that's required. So again, typically 13% is required, which would be one unit with a contribution to the IDP fund. We're actually going to propose two, which again comes out to 18%. As I said, this is intended for home ownership, so this would be managed as a condominium association, the professional management company that would handle the operations of the condominium as well as the on-site maintenance, et cetera, based upon the proposed use. So just a quick bird's eye view of what we're looking at for the site. Just a couple of different angles. I'll move through these very quickly because we can always come back to them for reference, but just so that people can have an understanding of the relationship of the buildings that are in and around the neighborhood. Different view again, this is looking back from the Suffolk Downs parking lot. And then another bird's eye view, Suffolk Downs being to the left of your screen. And then a street view looking back towards Faywood Ave. As you note, and if you're familiar with the neighborhood, you would know that the site slopes upwards, so obviously up towards the hill. So the grade and elevation of our site when you get to the sidewalk would be significantly lower than what the grade is at Faywood Ave, for example. So another view looking down Waldemar and then looking back up towards Wally. So this is the updated rendering. A couple of things that we've done with this include some changes to the materials and finishes, as well as just some cleaning up of the architecture. I'll let Eric talk a little bit about how we're approaching the site. Eric, if you could just give us a little bit of a quick overview on what we've done to update the exterior and again, some of the other features that we've added.
Sure, thanks, Rich. I think the first most obvious thing that we've done is we've reduced the height on the right side of the building by taking off a half of the floor and one of the larger units up there, and making that portion of the building just 2 stories above the basement level. On the left, we'd still have the 3 stories above the garden, the basement unit, and in doing that, we feel like we've kind of reduced that portion of the height. We've also looked at the landscaping around the property to try and to bury a lot of the what is the lowest level, the parking level, so that taking advantage of the natural hill of the site, we wanted to kind of let the grass and the green cascade down over and cover most of that lowest level. Those are some of the biggest changes, and then we've done quite a few drawings in here to kind of highlight that. But you also notice that we're looking at lighter colors, things that are a little bit more predominant in that area. I think the first one was a little darker, and there was some negative reaction to that.
Thanks, Eric. So our zoning district currently is the 1F 4000. There are 2 lots involved. As you can see here, I've highlighted those in the peach or reddish shade for these 2 lots, roughly about 100 feet in width and frontage. There is a passageway to our leftmost parcel that would remain open. We're not proposing to build anything within that passageway. And then you see the property, second parcel, which is our rightmost property in its location. And I'll walk through the zoning in a moment, but I just want to make sure that people understand the zoning district that is applicable here. And obviously anybody familiar with the neighborhood understands, you know, there are a significant number of changes happening, especially with the Suffolk Downs site and other areas along Waldemar. So this is what we call the our Macris abstract. This is from the Massachusetts Cultural Resource Information System. This is a inventory or a database that keeps track of all historic resources in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Anytime we propose to demolish an existing building, we do an analysis and do some due diligence on the background of the building. In this case, we see at the bottom, no results found. We searched for all of these different categories of significance. So I know that this comes up a lot in Boston, but this building has no historical significance and no significance concerning architecture or any other category that would typically trigger a further review for historic analysis. So our position is that when we do propose to demolish this building, assuming we get our approvals, there is no additional historical analysis that would be necessary. So just showing our site plan, this is the existing conditions, total of about 9,142 square feet combined. And as you can see here, that passageway I referenced earlier to the left side, and then the existing 2-story wood frame here at 116, which would be proposed to be demolished. So we have our proposed site plan, and I think we were asked at the last meeting if we could illustrate this a little bit better so that people could see what the footprint of our building looks like on our site. And Eric has done a good job of laying out the open space. So you can see anything that's in green would be considered the open space, including the front lawn, the rear setback as well. We show the locations of various decks for the specific units. And then the gray is the roof area, which is not necessarily occupied by anything. We're not proposing any roof decks or anything above that. You see the area that accesses the common parking garage, and then obviously the entranceway to the units. Our lower level plan, we call it the basement plan, but it's actually the ground level plan. But because we are below grade, most of this level here would be not visible, would not be above grade. So the parking area, the bike storage, and all of the other storage, including trash, recycle, et cetera, will be located at this level. We are showing a total of 14 parking spaces, which is 3 more parking spaces than that we have for proposed units. A number of these spaces are shown as tandem, but that is something that we typically allocate based upon requests for specific numbers of parking space. So if there are certain units that are interested in having more than 1 parking space, we do have a couple of arrangements with tandem parking spaces, you can see here. This would be the trash storage here. And again, this is all enclosed, so none of the trash or recycle bins would be located on the exterior of the building. And I believe this was one of the items that was requested at the last meeting to illustrate where that would be. And then we see here our bike storage. And then we have our lower level unit, which is about 1,100 square feet. And this unit would be accessible for persons with disabilities. There is no necessity to have an elevator in the building. We are providing a fully adaptable unit at the lower level, which would be entered at grade from the sidewalk. As you move up the building, this is considered our level 1 plan. And just a varying diversity of units. We have units 2, 3, 4, and 5 at this level. It's what we call a double loaded corridor here. So we have units on both sides of the corridor with our egress both front and rear. Second level plan, which would be as you move up the building, has again a mix of units in different sizes. We are striving to make these generously sized enough for families so that you can really cater and market towards those that are looking for a larger size unit, living unit, and something that's marketable to that segment. And then our upper level plan, and as Eric said, we have eliminated the unit that was on this side here to help lower the bulk of the building and the height. And then you can see the 2 upper level units here. Again, each unit has its own unique features and layouts, but we're trying to change them or try to have the makeup of these units not be all the same style. So our elevation, these are just our line drawing elevations, shows essentially the building from top to bottom. This area here, and as Eric had pointed out, is essentially below the average grade of the site. So our site actually really would start right above the parking level, or this lower level unit here. And then we move up the building. Our highest point is actually at 49 feet, but that's measured from the lowest level, grade level. We can look and see here that the average height of the building is actually 45 feet from grade. And looking at it in relation to the other buildings around it, we do have a section plan that we can show you that illustrates how it relates to the remaining portion of the neighborhood. Just our side view, and as I said, this is probably a better illustration here. The back portion of the building is closest to the highest slope on the site, and then it slopes down towards the street. And as you can see, that lower level is generally hidden below most of the grade of the site. Looking at our right side, again, you can see the change in topography going from the back to the front. And then the back of the building, actually, if you're looking at this from Faywood Ave, and we've reduced a significant amount of the bulk on this side of the building as well, you only see about 1 to 1.5 stories on the back side of the building. So this is just to illustrate sort of in a 3D model the elevations that we're talking about. And again, you can see the relationship of the back of our building, front of our building, and how it relates to the topography on the site. This is important. This was asked to be included for this meeting as well. One of the things that we wanted to show and illustrate is both sides of Faywood Avenue. The building directly behind us is 103 Faywood Ave. The distance between 103 and the front of the building at 116, for example, is about 56 feet. The distance from the back of our building to the back of 103 Faywood would be 64, almost 65 feet. Just under 65 feet total. When we get to the zoning chart, you'll see that the zoning code requires a 30-foot setback for rear yards for properties in this district. And that means that the intent of the code is that there be a 60-foot separation between buildings. So sometimes you will have that 30-foot setback, but at other times the intent of the code itself is to allow for enough buffer between buildings. And we have a significant amount of buffer here at almost 65 feet, which would be about 5 feet more than what the zoning code actually intends for separation of buildings from back to front. Again, this is just our elevation, our illustration, our rendering. We can always jump back to this for any specific questions, and I'll run through the zoning analysis now. So our proposed use is multifamily. There are multifamilies in the Waldemar Ave area. This would not be the first use that would be existing in this neighborhood. However, the current zoning allows for 1 unit maximum. East Boston is undergoing a planning study to change the zoning. I'm not certain at this point as to what the new zoning will be for Waldemar Ave. Typically, when a city goes through new zoning and takes a look at what changes can be made to the current zoning code, especially if it's been more than, for example, 30 years, because neighborhoods change and needs change in the city. Typically, and I can't guarantee it'll happen here, typically we do see an upzoning in a lot of neighborhoods that are sort of at their minimum zoning level. So we are proposing this multifamily. It will still require a variance at this time. There has not been an amendment to the zoning code yet, but we are proposing this based upon some of the signals that we get from the city and from the planning agency to determine whether or not this is something that would be appropriate for the site. And certainly we'll go through the process and continue to have that dialogue with the city. We do meet the minimum lot size. The minimum lot size required is 4,000 square feet. We will have twice as much as that, more than that. So we don't require any relief on our minimum lot size. Same thing when it comes to lot width and frontage. We have 60 feet more. We will have 60 feet more than what's required. So 40 feet being the minimum. So we do comply with that as well. Our side yards, we're showing 1 foot on the left and 3.5 feet on the right. And again, you'll hear this a lot when we talk about the spirit and intent of the zoning code. The intent of the zoning code is to have separation of certain distances between properties. In this case, it's about 20 feet. So we should be at least 20 feet on the right side. And as I mentioned earlier, that passageway, even though we're showing our property at almost 1 foot on the left property line, we should also be sufficiently set back from the other property to our left. Our front yard is what we call a modal setback, and the modal setback is essentially the average setback of all the buildings on that side of Waldemar Ave. We're fairly certain we can comply with that as well. The rear yard, and again, because this is a deep lot and the lot behind us is a deep lot, we sort of look at the totality of what the intent of the code is. As you can see here, the minimum amount required is 30 feet, which would suggest that if both properties need the 30-foot setback, there should be separation of 60 feet between the two properties. In this case, we feel that we would have more than that. I think it's almost 65 feet separation. So we will request a variance based upon the conditions that we're proposing. The floor area ratio, that's the amount of square feet that's permissible in the zoning sub-district based upon the amount of land mass that you have. Because we have 9,142 square feet and we are proposing 14,000 square feet, our FAR would be 1.58. Since this exceeds the total amount that's permissible, we would request a variance for that as well. The maximum height we are proposing, which would technically be a 3-story building at 45.1 feet based upon those elevations, would also require a variance for a half-story and about 10 feet. Again, because of the intent of the code, the buildings that are located to the rear of us are actually at a higher grade and therefore would be less impacted based upon our proposed height, simply because of the grade separation that we have. Our minimum open space, when you're in the 1F district and you're proposing anything more than 1 unit, it actually says there is no requirement for open space, although we are providing actually more open space than actually more than 750 square feet based upon the revisions that we made. I think it's closer to about 12 to maybe 1,400 square feet of open space. Nevertheless, it does comply and doesn't require a variance. Our parking would actually be, the requirement would actually be 22 spaces. We are proposing 14. So we'd be deficient by about 8 spaces and would require a variance for the change in parking. We started this process actually last summer, and we've been moving through with the City of Boston with obtaining a refusal letter and then submitting a petition to the Boston Zoning Board of Appeal. We have not yet established a hearing date, but we will once we conclude the community process, which is essentially where we're at now. We will likely hold an abutters meeting in the very near future once the new liaison is up to speed on all the projects that are happening in East Boston. Once the community process is completed, we'll go for a hearing before the Boston Zoning Board. We anticipate that may happen sometime before the end of winter. It could be early spring, assuming we get our approvals. And there's never a guarantee that we will get our approvals. But once we do, we would then also be subject to a process called BPDA design review. BPDA would analyze the architecture, the materials that we're using, ensure that we are meeting the standards and requirements that the city has set forth for urban design in neighborhoods like this, and ensure that all of our plans meet those requirements. Once our building permit were to issue, assuming that earliest it could be spring, maybe even early summer of 2022, we think it would take about a year to build this project from start to finish. And so that's essentially the overview of the timeline that we were thinking about. So at this point, Tony, I'll turn it back over to you for discussion.
Thank you. I just want to point out some of the concerns that were brought up in our meeting last September, just to refresh people on some of the letters and OHNC and others' thoughts. There was a lot of concern around the building casting shade in a butter's yards where their children currently play. There was also a privacy concern in that regard, where they can look down into people's yards. People complimented the design, but said something smaller would be happily agreed upon. There was a suggestion for 2 single-family homes on the lot. There was also concern for the removal of all the trees on the property, as well as the 1 foot of setback being unacceptable. The tandem spots were also a concern because it may incentivize owners to rent out their parking spaces to units with the adjacent space and then park their vehicle on the street.
Yeah, I can, if you want me to just run through, I can run through each of those. And Eric, feel free to jump in, Eric, when you can. So first of all, building too tall and would cast shade in the abutters' yards. I believe that the angle of the sun on this, correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, would be from the rear of our property to the left, starts to the left and moves around to the rear. So the shadow impact, if anything, and I probably should call it up, the shadow impact, if anything, would be more towards Waldemar Ave and less towards
yeah, most of it's going to fall, most of our shadow is going to fall onto Waldemar. Go back one to the zoning maps as good as anything, because at least that's oriented north.
Yeah.
And we can do a shadow study, but basically you can see that the bulk of this shadow is going to fall, up the page onto Waldemar Avenue, and for the taller portion onto our lower portion of the building. And that's partly also the reason we chose to shorten the right side as you face the building, or the left side if you look at it in plan here, so that the taller peak would cast less shadow than what's out there right now.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric. Let me just see if I can just get to another reference point so we can sort of get a look at some of those concerns.
Well, we could put together a shadow study too to help people see what the impacts are. There's no
sometimes these bird's eye views actually show some shadow, but I just want to maybe point out here. So where my cursor is, I believe, is the southern horizon, aiming that way. So if anything, the sun is coming and reflecting down towards Waldemar, and sort of as it passes behind the hill, keeps continuing in this direction here. So the shadow coming back towards Faywood Ave, for example, would be unlikely. These trees, for the most part, these trees most left of our site probably are not going to be touched because they're not within our property boundary. There's a few trees here on the parcel that would be impacted. And then obviously these trees way to the back are not, I don't believe are within our parcel either. So there still would be a good deal of privacy that would be maintained, especially for the people along Fairwood Ave. And again, I think by just looking at the grade separations from both Fairwood to Waldemar, I think the impacts for privacy as well as shadow are somewhat minimal. So I see that, you know, two single family, to do two single family dwellings, I understand that's a request at this time. That's, you know, we're proposing one structure with a multifamily. And I fully understand that, you know, people have a different opinion on that. And, you know, at this time, that's not what our proposal involves. Side yard, rear yard related concerns, butters are concerned about the removal of all the trees in the property. I don't think, again, we're not removing all of the trees. I think that there are trees that obviously get preserved, especially far left and far rear. But I don't necessarily think they're all being removed. We have, so when say a 1 foot setback is unacceptable to the butter, would like to see this comply with zoning. I believe we're talking about the left side of the property where we have a 1 foot step back. Let me just jump back to our site plan, because I think that's an important distinction here. So,
yeah, if I could speak to that for a second,
Yeah.
it is 1 foot on that lowest level towards the front of the building. If you pull up our green, the drawing I have kind of right after this with the green, we're about 9.5 feet from the property line on the left side, and more than that, 11 or 12 on the right side. So it's really just that lower gray area there where we start to get to a point where we're 1 foot from the passageway property line.
yeah. And one of the things, just so we're clear, because again, we go to the spirit and intent of the code. Not every site is the same, but we are showing the passageway at 12 feet. So, you know, we do have a pretty good separation but for that very lower level, we'd have almost 21 feet between our building and the building that's here, which is consistent with what the code requires. So parking related, tandem spots are a concern for abutters because it would incentivize owners to rent out their parking spot to adjacent space and park their vehicle on the street. Well, you know, we've talked about this before. This is a couple of things that, you know, this is typically something that we see a lot of concern over when we're doing a condo project like this. Every condo project I'm involved in, we do not permit owners to allow for outside parking in the garage. There's liability issues that go along with that, and it's in the interest of the condominium association to not permit that. So unless you're an owner of a unit in the building, you don't necessarily have the ability to park in any of the spaces, you know, and that's pretty well documented in the condominium documents. In addition, we only provide 2 locations for tandem spaces, and that does offer an option for those, and we do hear this a lot, that, you know, people will have more than one car. So there are some options here for households that have more than one car to have the tandem spaces. It doesn't really work well if it's, you know, being utilized by other unit owners that, you know, may have to move a car or have somebody else move their car in order to access their space. So it's typically assigned to one household, but allows for, you know, multiple vehicles to be located in the garage. Again, there is no opportunity, if you will, for people outside the condominium to access the parking because of, you know, liability and security issues. We don't necessarily want to have people from outside the building utilizing the parking area. So I'm just running through the comments here. Thoughts on roof line? Okay, so
Cindy's had her hand raised for a moment. I saw she was commenting. If sounds like
Yeah.
she's one of the abutters on Faywood.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just going in order, but I can go wherever you want. So
Oh, I'm
Cindy,
sorry.
so you said no rendition of 99 Faywood. Well,
Oh.
so we didn't necessarily render 99 Faywood, but I think if you look at the relationship of 103 Faywood, you do see.
Why aren't you doing 99? I'm directly
Well,
behind that. I'm behind
sorry.
this monstrosity.
Yep.
It's gonna go up.
I'm sorry,
56.
allow me to finish. we can't show every building, but we are
Well, I
showing.
think you should
Oh,
show, I'm a
excuse
direct
me,
butter.
excuse me, let me finish.
Yeah, go ahead.
What we're showing is called a section plan. When you show a section plan, what we're showing is the depth of the building at 103. So if your building, let me just
I'm
jump
right
back.
next door.
Yep, I can go to the bird's eye view on this, and
Mhm.
you can utilize 103 as sort of the benchmark of the distance between our building and your building. So
But at 103, they're a lot further back than I am. My house goes probably about 20 feet until the fence, until the drop off to go down onto Waldemar Ave.
Okay.
So this monstrosity is gonna be going right into my backyard practically. And I'm not gonna have sunlight. I'm not gonna be able to have a garden because I'm certainly not gonna get sunlight direct sunlight there.
Which house
And I
is your,
I'm gonna
so-
have people looking at me. This is supposed to be a one-family homes around here. I don't know what the hell's going on.
okay,
But I'm not
If I can
happy.
address that just a little bit.
Yes,
After
go
the
ahead,
last
right
meeting-
ahead.
After the last meeting, there was a lot of concern about people looking back out of the building towards
Yeah,
your house, towards 103. So there are no windows on the back of our building,
99.
specifically for that reason. All of our windows face either Waldemar or to the right or to the left. So
But
we
I
took
would
all the
still like
windows
that.
off the-
Well, I still don't, I'm sorry to, but I still don't understand. I would like to see someone do a rendition of 99 Faywood Ave and how it's going to affect me. Because I am telling you, this is going to be right in my yard. And
Okay, let me-
it's amazing how they completely ignore 99 Faywood Ave. I'm a direct abutter.
nobody's, excuse me.
Oh,
no-
I'm sorry.
Nobody's
Nobody's
ignoring
trying
you.
to
So why
ignore
can't I
yours.
get a
We just grabbed
rendition
one
of
of the two houses there. That's where the section was cut for the,
So
that I
cut
had for
another
the
section. I mean, you
building.
can't do that.
I certainly can. Based
good,
on,
that's what I
I haven't
appreciate.
been on your property. I certainly wouldn't go on your property without it. But if
Yeah.
I'm looking at Google Earth, it looks like your building extends
further.
about 7 feet further back. Or
Yeah.
is it, okay, so about
Further,
7 feet further back.
Close.
So
yeah.
if, and granted, this is all based on as best estimate as I could get from the city's GIS. So if we're showing that our building is about 65 feet right now, yours
Mhm.
would be about 58 feet from ours. So
Yeah.
if that's right, like I said, I haven't done any measurements.
Well, I would like a
on
rendition.
site.
I think that's only fair where I am a direct abutter and I'm getting the tallest part of this building that you're proposing being right in my yard, right in my view. I'm not going to be able to see anything except the back of the building. I didn't move up here 46 years ago so I could just look at the back of the building. Because, you people just want to keep building and building. I mean, Waldemar Ave is going to be loaded with buildings as it is from Revere, from Suffolk Downs. You're not getting enough. There's not enough buildings. I mean, come on. I don't understand it. And I certainly am not going to, I'm going to keep protesting this. I don't care. And I don't know what we're going to have to start writing to Michelle Wu because she was dead set against it. And now she's our mayor and I want to know what the hell's going on with her too. I will contact her and I believe she's going to go right with us.
Yep, good. That's your, and listen, that's your right. Nobody's saying you can't do that.
Oh,
But
I most
we have-
certainly will.
No, look at, we're not here to argue. We're here to present.
No, I'm not. I know, but it's very
Okay.
annoying.
Right, we're just trying to show you what the project is and we're here to
Yes,
listen.
I
to concerns.
appreciate that, but I'd like a rendition of mine.
So let me just be clear here. So what I'm drawing here, is this your house, the back of your house here?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're looking at what, what we're trying to
Yeah.
draw for you.
And that drop, you'll see like a little line. That's right. There's my yard. There's a little line that you're touching right now, and then it drops down. So you're
Yep.
gonna tell me this building's gonna go up beyond me or pretty close to me, and I'm gonna be seeing nothing but a building and no sunlight in my garden. I don't understand it. I'm supposed to
So,
say, well, that's fine.
With all
No, that's
with all
wonderful.
due respect, there's no way that our building can block the sunlight south of us.
Yeah, but what happens when you get the sun in the day? I know that's the only time I get sun is in the daytime for a garden.
We can do it. We can do a shadow study, but the sunlight's
Yeah, do one.
going to come from the south.
Do one. Well, do one anyway.
The sun is coming this way here.
Sure. Well, I don't understand
Well,
that because, your tomatoes don't grow unless you have sunlight. And the only way
Right,
you
but-
get sunlight
but-
is when it's coming in
but-
through the,
Right.
right now it's an empty lot. So sun is still coming through the trees. We still have a lot of sunlight in the area because there's all trees and there's all space. Now it's
Right.
gonna be nothing but a building. And I mean, then I'm gonna have to,
Well, let's, again, we want to educate, not argue.
yeah.
This is,
No, I'm
this-
just very annoyed.
Suffolk Downs is, well, I don't want you to be ignored. I just want, I want to be I want to be clear with you just so we explain things. And sometimes
Yes.
explaining things helps you understand it better. So
Well,
Suffolk
no, I
Downs,
understand it.
okay, well, let me finish then. Suffolk Downs is due north, which means the
Mhm.
sun is on the southern horizon, which is this
Mhm.
way. So the sun kind of takes a path like this. If our building is here, the sun is shining to the back of our building, not the other way around. So certainly if you have a concern over sunlight in this area, then having a building here would definitely be of concern. However, we also have to take into consideration the height of our building. And I just don't see, and we'll happily get you the shadow analysis, but
Well, you're pointing out 116 Waldemar Ave, but you're not pointing out where the taller part of the building is going to be,
It-
which is
it-
the empty lot.
if you just
It's
let me
that
finish,
empty lot right
let,
there.
let me finish.
Yeah.
If the building is here
Mm-hmm.
and the sun is going this way, then the shadow logically would go towards Waldemar Ave, not the other way. We wouldn't be casting a shadow this way.
I'm not going to argue with that, but I still don't, I still want a rendition, and I still don't understand why they have to have this
Sure.
monstrosity in a,
We-
single family residential area. I don't understand it.
We
I
will
mean,
get there.
why? What is the reason behind it? There's plenty of housing coming up
Money.
Waldemar Ave.
Sure, we can provide that for you.
All
Hey,
right,
if you don't mind,
thank you.
Mike, thank you, Cindy. Mike had some comments in the chat relating to the roof line and the gable. I'm not sure if you wanted to speak to that, Mike, or we can read your comments here. There's one that says the false or implied gable on the front and rear facade looks old and jarring. The actual roof pitch is indicated by the dormers. Why not go with that?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
we
I'm
can listen.
sorry.
We can listen to recommendation. What we're trying to do here is, I think, and I'll let Eric answer this, but I think we're trying to pick up on some of the precedent that we do see in the immediate vicinity, rather than having this more of the flat top all around. But Eric, why don't we talk a little bit about why we come up with this?
No, that's exactly it. I love the efficiency and serviceability, maintenance ability of a flat roof, as much or more than most people. But when I was walking up and down the street, I saw a lot of peaked roof lines, and felt like if we wanted to kind of respect some of the texture that was there, we would have to have a pretty prominent peaked roof. If that's not something people like, respect to, or want, I'm happy to kind of redesign. We're going to redesign at, and on some level based on people's comments. That was it. It was simply that I put it there thinking that it felt like it fit in somewhat with the building that had been there and the buildings that are around it. But welcome in all these comments. Definitely.
Eric, I want to be real clear on this. Again, I look at this and I assume that there's an effort being made here to make a building that is more contextual, that doesn't look like new construction. And I'm an outlier in this community in that I'm a real fan of hard modern architecture. Most of my neighbors would look at something that I love and think it's a gas station. But point of fact is, I mean, you have a height variance issue. And if you went with a flat roof, I mean, unless that upstairs unit has a cathedral ceiling in it that requires a peaked roof, you could potentially save yourself 5 or 6 feet of height on the building by going with a flat top roof. Also bearing in mind, many, I would say 90% of the 3-family houses in this community are flat roof or have kind of a low slung tip up roof, like a lean-to style roof with a very low pitch to it. And you could have a prominent architectural detail like a strong cornice line on a flat roof, not unlike what you have in the lower portion of the building above the garage. It would be completely appropriate, and again, save some height on the top portion of the building, and likely make some of your abutters more happy.
I'd be happy to, and I welcome all these kind of comments. Yeah, absolutely.
And again, I'm looking at the details of the balconies that you have. Am I reading your rendering correctly that that is glass?
It is right now. I'm not positive about that. I saw quite a few different deck expressions a lot going up and down the street. So I don't know. What do you think? What do you think would be kind of appropriate? It is. I felt like this was helping to break up the mass a little bit, but we could do lots of different things with that.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm a fan of wood balusters. I mean, if you're looking for, you know, a more traditional building,
Yeah.
I mean, you just use, you know,
We can do
1.5
that.
spindles, you know, 1.5 inches apart.
Happy
Create
to
some
do that.
rhythm and texture, a counter rhythm to the clapboard sheathing
Yeah.
on the rest of the building. And again, I understand glass is transparent. If there's like a sliding glass door on the other side of it, you can see out and it looks seamless and everything. But we're not in Los Angeles. We're not in Miami.
Mhm.
We're in Orient Heights.
No, happy.
And if you're
Happy
going to
to
put forth
definitely.
the effort to design a building that looks for all the world, an attempt at a more traditional looking building, that type of a finish, it looks silly. And I don't think we want something that looks silly.
Okay,
And again,
yeah.
if you build this exactly as it's planned, my life doesn't change at all. But I am very sensitive to the people that have to wake up every morning and look out their window at it.
No, I absolutely appreciate that. When we looked at balusters, I felt they were a little heavy, but if that's what people want, we're very happy to make changes like that.
Heavy equals substance, and substance is never a bad thing in architecture. Full stop.
Well, I appreciate that. Would love to talk about that more, but I was trying to kind of create a break between the two volumes, and if it's not wanted, it's not wanted. That's fine.
I saw in the chat, Diane DiGiacomo was commenting that she wanted a moment to speak. It also mentioned the years of meetings as abutters with Suffolk Downs, saying we negotiated 1 and 2 families across the street, which Tom agreed to build. Why would we want this huge structure? I'm not sure, Diane, if you wanted to unmute and speak, or
I'd love to speak, Tony, but one second. I have 2 little Yorkies that won't be quiet. Richard, I have a couple of questions first and then a couple of comments. My first question is, did you, you said current zoning is for 1 and 2 families?
All right, it's one family, 1F.
Oh, it's only 1 family zone for 1 families?
That's correct.
Okay. Second question is, do you have any idea when the abutters meeting will be?
I don't. I believe the new liaison was just recently hired for neighborhood services.
Correct.
Lena,
I spoke to her today, actually.
Yeah, I have a conversation set for next week with her because I have a number of matters in East Boston that we're hoping to get scheduled. So I have a call set up for next week, and this is one of the items that I'm talking to her about.
Okay, and then I just have a couple of comments. One is that we're really concerned about the density. 2, for those of you who don't know, I live 2 doors down at 124 Waldemar, and I've been in years of meetings with Suffolk Downs as all the abutters. And Tom is one of the owners of the track, and he negotiated with us that because of the way the street and all the 1 and 2 families that we have on the street right now, that he would build across from my house and 116 and to go up to the first house on the left would be 1 and 2 families only. He would put a park there and make it essentially like the neighborhood that it is. So
I I said, how noble of Tom, with his other 160 acres and, 10,000 housing units. So yeah, I'm not
Well,
surprised
I
you
mean,
didn't do that.
right, but we can't stop that, but we can stop what's right in front of our front door or our back door.
Yep.
Okay. I understand, I've known these people my whole life. I understand about, money and developing and the whole bit, but I with the abutters will oppose the 11 units. So I just, we went through this 3 years ago. I think we got it down to 6 and then the developer pulled out. So these meetings are exhausting. I mean, because we started out here as abutters with the casino, and then we went to this condos and development, and now it's this, and then 2 doors down, it's going to be another project. I mean, I just found out that the gentleman behind this 116 passed away last month, and he went to his grave, very upset about this. It's just very exhausting. I mean, there has to be a happy medium.
I don't disagree with you, Mr. Giacomo. I think that, as I've done this for many years in the community, I understand that there has to be a happy medium, and we're hoping to find that. And if we can, then, that makes it work for everybody. And as I always say, it's not just, it doesn't just have to work for the developer, it has to work for the neighbors as well. So, we are going through the process that we're instructed to go through, and I apologize if they're exhausting. Believe me, I find myself doing this probably too many nights myself. So I think that we're trying to work towards that. I think part of this exercise is to understand what specifically works better than what doesn't, and I think we're trying to find what that is. So
well, can I just make a suggestion? I mean, I'm not an attorney, but why not ask the abutters like to write their own little proposal, just to get a general idea of what would work. I mean, and then then have these meetings. I mean, what could you live with, and go back and forth. I know you're going to still fight for your side or whatever, but
not necessarily, Mr. Giacomo. What our process is not. Look at it. We don't pretend to know what everybody wants, right? We can't come to something and say this works for everybody. This is not something that we certainly understand that people have concerns about this, and we're going to try to work towards something that people also can be supportive of. I understand people say, well, you should just do 2 one-family homes. If that were the case, then we probably would have just did 2 one-family homes and not gone through the process. The reason we're having this process is because we're proposing something that's more than what's typically allowed under the zoning code. So that's why we're engaged in this. And again, I know it's exhausting. I understand that, but it is the process, and it's unique in the sense that it allows neighbors to have input and say in this. There are a lot of municipalities I do this in. There isn't even a community process. You go right to the hearing, and we make our case to the board, and that's the best shot that neighbors get. So we get to work this out in advance and have a lot of dialogue. And I do appreciate the input. We try to listen and try to adjust based upon what we hear. But we're not shutting you out, and we're not ignoring you. We want to.
No, and I understand that, Richard, but I'm just saying, if like all the abutters could just send you an email and, their concerns and, that would, I think that would be good. I mean, I don't know. I'm just figuring that instead of like every meeting, it's the same thing. Like this is, the feedback that we can give you.
This is the process, right? So this is it. This is what we're hearing. When you say to hear what the abutters want, and it's not so much what the abutters want, because it has to be part of what's feasible for the owner, and we're trying to find what that is. So we're working towards it. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for your comment.
Thank you.
Gail's had her hand raised. Get a comment. Gail, I saw you posted in the chat that you would like to speak.
Thank you, Tony. And sorry that we're reading of your resignation. So, that'll be a big loss. But anyway, going forward on this, and hopefully we'll see you soon somewhere, anyway. But going forward, I think what you fail to appreciate from abutters, and you've been doing this a long time, and we know this, but the current zoning stands, that's a fact. And that's what courts will rule on, not what projections of the city may be or want to be. So we have to deal with the zoning at hand. And if it's 1 or 2 family housing, then that's what should be proposed. We realize what the developer's interests are. Obviously, we weren't born last night. And the problem, the reason you're coming to the community, there is no hardship now if you were to build within the code. But because you want to build way outside the code, you have to have variances. And so what you're seeking to do is rule by variance, zone by variance, and that's really not acceptable to our communities. This is going to be in the middle of 1 and 2 family houses, and then up the street is going to be another project proposed by another developer, and it's going to go on and on. And so you're really, trying to attack the zoning in place that protects us as abutters. And the tree canopy, I'd want to speak to that. We're underserved in East Boston, so I think at all costs those trees should be protected. They're old growth, and we just need all that we can in East Boston dealing with the pollution from the airport in particular. So I think what would make people happy is if you did what Diane said, is come up with something within the zoning code and start from there instead of doing the kind of bait and switch. And
Yeah, it's not a bait and switch, Gail, because we've been very specific about what our proposal is. So
I wasn't really finished. I wasn't really finished.
Oh, I'm sorry. You got cut. I couldn't hear you. You got cut off. So I didn't.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And you're not really allowed to change the character of the neighborhood under the zoning code. So if we all start from that premise, I think we'll be happier. But we're just really kind of tired. At least I am. I've been to a lot of these hearings, as you know, and in different neighborhoods, and it's the same old song. So if we have to fight hard for a neighborhood, I guess we have to fight hard for a neighborhood. And I just think it's wrong. There's no hardship, and you're going for the gusto here. And I just think you need to start with the 1 and 2 family zoning at the most.
Yeah. Thank you for the comments, Gail. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, I do, because you make comments like, you could stick within the zoning, but then when we do propose a project that's within the zoning, you oppose that too. So, I don't know.
No, I don't. No,
Well, I mean, yeah, you do, but I mean, that's I don't want to get into other projects. You do.
cite those facts.
We don't need to
Really.
discuss anybody's,
Well, you're not going to get away with comments. I am not opposed to all development. I'm just opposed to
No, just
size development.
just every development in the neighborhood. I get it. And not all development. I understand.
Well, it depends.
we
I think this is
we had a
wrong.
comment. We had a comment from Melissa Healy saying a happy medium would be 2 single families or max 2 family homes, not a huge condo building.
Okay.
See, David P was asking, will we have an opportunity to vote on this project at a future abutters meeting? And there will be a vote through OHNC, after which we provide the letter of support or letter of non-support, whatever it may be, to the attorneys, developers, all folks involved, and sent it along to the like BPTA and everything, and zoning board. I'm just checking the chat to see. Mike and Eric were going back and forth discussing construction materials and the masonry. Mike said he assumed the garage door and parking area would be concrete, as functioning retaining walls to the sloping terrain. And Eric said, yes, the sides and the rear will be retaining, but this front wall, we're thinking it's a pretty typical foundation, and the front wall is infill construction. Diane asked, and unrelated,
go
oops,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, Mike had also asked if we could look at doing the whole lowest level in masonry, and we have, and we will again. We'll go back and look at that a little bit. So, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Diane asked an unrelated question to the proposal. I'm just saying who will be taking your place, and that would be the vice president, Noah Lukowitz, who fills in.
Come on.
And Gail commented saying, talking about the details of construction is premature because we need to determine what is allowed here.
I think talking about details of construction is always a fair point in these projects, because it does let people understand some of the benefits that do go along with redevelopment of a site. So part of the conversation often, regardless, and again, I said in the beginning, there's no guarantee we get our approvals. I think what we need to also understand is that there are some additional benefits that go along with development of a site, whether it's this many units or some other variation of what we're proposing. Things like on-site stormwater management, has a benefit to surrounding properties, for example. That's not something that exists there today. We don't have on-site stormwater management. Basically the ground itself is left to deal with whatever we have for stormwater runoff. That's an improvement that gets made to the site, and that's going to be, for new construction. Things like, life safety, the current structure, and I understand it's a smaller building, but the proposed, building would be fully sprinkled with a central station alarm. It's something that's different than what, typically exists on the street. There's just different things that, method of construction, type of construction are always relevant to the conversation, including, what type of sequencing and mechanics would be necessary to build it. I think those are fair questions, the point of these meetings.
Thank you.
Richard, I'd like to say, yeah, that's right. It is important to talk about construction materials and all the other issues. However, the impacts are different depending on the size of the building and the impacts that are going to be on the neighborhood. So I see it as premature. I think we need to discuss zoning.
Yeah, it's never premature if it's educational, informative. So I think it's fine if we have the time to talk about it. I'm happy to discuss those or answer those questions as well.
Well, it becomes a moot point if we're talking about 1 or 2 family impact of a project or a 14-unit impact on a project.
Well, I think talking about any development on the site, should consider impacts. So, we have no problem talking. Pretty much every meeting I talk about development, we talk about impacts. So
Just so
I
you
know,
know,
the impacts are all different depending on the size. So
pardon me,
it's all
just-
apples
just
and
so you know,
oranges.
Mrs. Miller, when we go, if we're successful and we go through BPDA design review, we do talk to the Planning and Development Authority, and they are very interested in aesthetic comments that we've received throughout the neighborhood process. So I keep track of these, and when we send over our initial drawings, I always say anything that I've heard from the neighborhood, even if it's a one-off comment or something that was made many times. It may seem premature, but the BPDA is interested in hearing these comments later.
Well, I would say the community at large has not been really happy with the design allowances in this community. So I think that's a general fact, and that's kind of what you always hear when you're at these meetings. It's nothing new.
yeah, and Gail, I've heard the exact opposite too. So again, it's not detrimental to the process to have these conversations, and I think there's 2 sides to that discussion.
Brooke has had her hand raised for a hot minute here. If you'd like to speak, Brooke.
Thank you. I am the direct abutter at 103 Faywood Ave. And I'd like to first speak to the point that Gail just brought up about speaking about the details. And Mike, I want to thank you for your input here about like the railing material. But the truth is, it should go on the record that the people that are the direct abutters to this property, we're not concerned about the railings. And if, you know, if this comes back to the neighborhood council and say, oh, you know, oh, we listened to the feedback and we took out the glass railings and we changed the shape of the roof. So we responded to the feedback. I don't think that's wholly accurate. So the people that live close to this,
Will they handle?
you know, have greater concerns than that. And I agree. I mean, I hear your point that it can be part of the education and conversation, but I think I will have, I'll be more able to focus on details like that once we're sure what kind of construction is going to happen here. So I wanted to say that. I also wanted to say that to come to the meeting and say that it went from, you heard feedback, so you went from 12 to 11. I don't think that that's enough. And, you know, the feedback is that we're zoned for single families, and to maintain the character of where we all chose to live, we want it to remain that way. So to take off one unit, I don't think that is reflective of listening to what this community has said. I tried to keep up with the presentation, particularly when it spoke to the specifics of the impacts on my direct property. And I heard, you know, there was a comment made that, you know, an attempt was made to reduce the bulk to the rear, and you'll only see 1 to 1.5 stories. Well, that's 1 to 1.5 stories that
Too
shouldn't
much.
be there, and will completely take away the sight line that we enjoy. And I don't think that's fair. And I don't think that that's right when the purpose of making the building that high is to maximize profits. It's not right. There was a lot of mention, I'm gonna watch the video of this because I couldn't catch it all, about how deep the lots are. And, you know, there's ample space between where my house will be and where this project will be. I don't think that you can take it from my lot size and then put something all the way to the back of it and still say there's enough space. So the zoning code says what it says. There's supposed to be this many feet from my building, and if I have a little extra, then that's mine. And there's supposed to be so many feet from that building, and there's not. So I will dispute that if you choose to bring that and say that there's ample size, and to compare, to say that I'm going to have more distance from this building than I do from the one across the street. Well, that doesn't even make sense. That's a point that I didn't even understand why it was made, unless it was made just to try to boost up that this building is taking in, you know, our considerations. You know, the words that like, you'll be less impacted now. Well, I think there's an acknowledgement in the impact that would be made by putting this large building on these two one-family lots. Yeah, the abutters have pretty much stayed consistent for the past 2 years and the past 2 developers. So I'm not sure where this is gonna get to on your end, but it's not even close to what is acceptable. And the point is, this is for profit. It's not right.
Yes.
You should
Yes.
build the code or don't
Yes.
build.
Yes.
Thank you for the time.
Patricia, you had your hand raised as well.
Yes, I want to say thank you, Brooke. I agree with everything you said. You know, talking about shade and trees and everything. Well, I live a few houses down from 116. And at the moment, one side of at the end of my block, they have built a giant multi-unit apartment. On the other side, they are in the process of building this humongous multi-unit apartment. This is crazy, okay? As of right now, I can't even get off my street to get onto Waldemar Ave. I have to go the long way around because of the traffic is crazy. This is a small street, one way in, one way out. It's crazy. It's overdevelopment to the max. This is a predominantly one family neighborhood. Okay, the zoning requirements say 1 to 2 family homes can be built. The people that are developing, they're going like above and beyond what is in code for this neighborhood. I just feel like my neighborhood is just disappearing right in front of me. My husband has lived here over 50 years. And I think it's very sad. And like Brooke said, it's for profit. It's for profit. They are taking away our neighborhoods. I'm going to oppose this at every chance I have. It's just not right. Stay in code, do 1, maybe 2 family units, and that's the way it should be. And talk about historical places. 116 has been here over 30 years. Okay, over 40 years. This is a historical landmark over here. I don't even know if they're supposed to be building units like that, but that's how I feel on it. And I want to thank you all for voicing your opinions, because I think this is just craziness. Like I said, overdevelopment to the max on our street, my street. Thank you.
Thank you. I see the comments, just looking through them, Tony. One that I hear a lot, and it's from Veronica, is how is the ZBA getting away with approving all of these illegal variances? Variances, by definition, are considered exceptions to the zoning code. You have to get the zoning board to vote to grant the variance. There's nothing "quote unquote" illegal about them. The code is written, and it was written in this particular case more than 30 years ago. You know, cities evolve and change, and that's the one reason you have variances, because it gives flexibility to boards of appeal to grant exceptions. So whether or not you agree or disagree with them, there's nothing illegal about them. It's a process. A variance is an appeal. It's an appeal that requests a change in the code based upon the conditions or the objectives of the city or the particular municipality. So I don't want people to get the impression that somehow by asking for a variance, because this comes up a lot, that somehow the board's doing something illegal. It's not.
Yeah, it is. I don't care what you're saying. Neighborhood.
Yeah, a zoning board is empowered to grant a variance. It's actually in the zoning code. It spells out that they have the discretion to grant a variance, and there's nothing illegal about it. That's the process.
I thought that the neighborhood code was like for the East Boston neighborhood, not to destroy it. And with all this building going on around me, that's exactly what is happening. They are destroying my way of life. They are destroying my neighborhood, not just mine. It's making like hardship on me and on my neighbors. It's just not right. It really isn't.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
And one more comment just around variances in the chat from Gail, just stating that variances are based on hardship.
Well,
which she was not seeing in this.
Gail brings that up a lot, and it's, she simplifies what variance are based on. Variance are based on more than just hardship. Variances are based upon, or the granting of a variance is based upon, more than just what we call hardship. Hardship is the standard by which you look at compliance with the zoning code and whether or not the project can meet the specific requirements of the code. And in this case, things like topography, soil conditions, shape of the lot, the relationship of the lot to other lots around it. Those are all taken into consideration. And things like, and if we break it down to its narrowest form, things like rear yard setback, for example, When you have a sloped lot like we have here, those are opportunities for a zoning board to consider as to whether or not what we call a literal enforcement of the code creates what we call a hardship. So to suggest that just it's hardship is got to be looked at through the lens of what it is specifically that you're asking the variance for. So if you look at, for example, a rear yard on a sloped lot, it may be difficult to comply with the code. If the code says you have to have 30 feet, you may not be able to have 30 feet based upon the topography and soil conditions. That's what we mean by hardship. It doesn't necessarily mean just because we want to build a larger building, somehow we have to demonstrate that there's a hardship there. That's use. We're talking about a difference when we're talking about regulations that affect the dimensions of a building. So it's not as simple, and I know, Gail, you like to simplify things, but it's not necessarily as simple as you put it. There's a lot other considerations that go into what defines hardship and what specifically the hardship relates to. And in this case, that's my job and my my responsibility to make that argument to the zoning board and not necessarily to the neighborhood. That's not necessarily where you make that argument.
Brooke also commented wanting to clarify that only one of the trees on the rear part of the property is on her parcel. So the rest would actually be on the lot where this building would be built.
Right, and I want to just clarify on the trees, Tony, as well. These are not considered public shade trees. I don't want the argument to be somehow misconstrued. There is the requirement that when we remove trees, I'm sorry, I can't hear if people can mute themselves. So typically what we have is when you have public shade trees that are in the public way, removal of those trees requires a process, including a hearing before the tree warden for the city of Boston. It's a state law that says you can't remove any trees that are considered public shade trees without a hearing first and without approval. The current owner of the property could take down any trees on her property right now. The development of this site doesn't necessarily dictate whether or not a tree can be cut down. In this case, it could be done tomorrow. So I don't want people to get caught up in the fact that this development somehow affects the ability to have trees on the site. I don't even know the condition of the trees. Some trees I understand are large and old, and sometimes they actually are recommended for removal. So I don't know the answer to that question, but don't necessarily think just because they provide shade that somehow they actually have to be preserved. They're private trees. They're privately owned.
Okay.
Thank you, Dennis, for your comment.
Not tree court. Dennis Naha said, I like it. I hope it gets built. And Gail was stating we can have personal commitments to the environment.
I agree.
Diane is asking, with all these individual projects happening, is there some overall vision for what the neighborhood will be? Who tends to move into these condos? What do they bring with them to the neighborhood?
I can't answer who would move in or what they bring to the neighborhood. I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't know that's necessarily relevant to a zoning discussion. There have been numerous housing units built over the last 10 years in East Boston. The change to this community, I think a lot of people will agree, has been very positive. People who have moved into our neighborhood, who now call East Boston home. I think that, providing additional housing units to a neighborhood that is in very high demand certainly helps with stabilizing the cost of housing and, whether it's rental or condo. So a lot of these, I guess, indirect benefits that people don't necessarily, suggest are part of any development are there. There are, as I said, numerous projects throughout the community that have brought new people to live here in East Boston.
There's a person with the username of iPhone who has their hand raised. I'm not sure if that was on purpose, if they had a comment, or if they might have accidentally hit it. Seems like they might have accidentally hit the raised hand. Let's see, Melissa Healy commented, these requests for variances seem to be to maximize profit at the expense of the neighborhood, sorry, which is zoned for single families. I don't see any other additional comments here, questions. I did take some notes here. Rich, did you want to come back for another round of review for this proposal? I know that Eric was discussing with Mike the changing like facade and whatnot. I'm not sure if that was something, if you intend to keep redesigning and want to come back, or what your
Yeah.
next steps are.
Yeah, I think that I think we're gonna have a conversation with the client, and we'll see what we can do for purposes of further addressing some of the concerns that we've heard tonight. So let me do that, and I'll circle back, and we'll figure out what the next steps will be, whether we want an additional meeting.
Okay, that sounds good. We did get one more comment in the chat. I'll just read it before we close out here tonight. Veronica Shavonik stated, families are not moving into these new developments. In fact, families are fleeing East Boston. East Boston High School has lost 500 students. They had to move the 7th and 8th grade up to the high school.
There's a lot to unpack there, Tony. I don't know that that's necessarily an accurate description of the reason why the high school has moved, or whether they've lost 500 students, or the reason for moving 7th and 8th grade. I believe there is a plan that the Boston Public Schools, and I know I've spoken to the principal at the high school regarding that plan. But to say that families are not moving into these new developments is a generalization and doesn't necessarily consider all the facts. I don't know that Ms. Shaponik has all of the facts and details of every development that's occurred in East Boston. So, I mean, these just general blanket comments don't necessarily, they're more speculative than they are based actually in fact.
Since we don't have any additional comments, feedback, questions, or anything, I'll organize the notes that I have. I'll pass them along to you, Rich. And I'll send along that recap along with the recording of this meeting. Oh, Rich, do you have these slides? Could you possibly send them along to me, and then we'll.
Sure. I'll send you the
pass them
Dropbox
on
link,
to-
Tony. Yep, not a problem.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. And with that, that will be the end of our meeting for this evening. So thank you all so much for attending. And we will be in touch shortly. Take care. Have a wonderful rest of your Thursday.